For the last part of our public company research project, we're going to be looking at the cash flow statement and the balance sheet to do some ratio analysis like you did in chapters 14 and 15. And that's what we're doing here. We just want, you learned about the cash flow statement in chapter 14. So we want you to see an example of that in practice in your company's financial statements. And in addition, you learned about some of the ratios that you can use to evaluate businesses. We want you to practice that using your company's financial statements. As always, you're going to follow the link to your most recent 10K. Again, you've done this for every one of these projects. You've done this, so just make sure you go to the company's most recent 10K so you can pull the information. Use your selected AI LLM to answer the questions. I just kind of went a little more straightforward this time and just said, my company's Dillard's. Can you tell me the cash flow method they use? And can you tell me what their current ratio is? Note, for this project, you do have to do both questions. There's not an option. You have to do both questions for this. Every public company will have an answer for this. And so please answer both questions. After you've answered the questions, check out what your AI LLM said. For my particular situation, it said Dillard uses the indirect method for statement of cash flows, and it calculated the current ratio for me. It said 2.4 million for current assets and 902,000 for current liabilities, and then did the math for me. And then your job here is to verify that information. Check if it's correct for cash flows. Look for the financial statements. Sometimes the financial statements in the table of contents will just say financial statements. Sometimes it'll say statement of cash flows, consolidated statement of cash flows. You want to find the cash flow statement in the 10K and then compare that to the different methods that are discussed in chapter 14. You did a bunch of work with the indirect method in chapter 14. That's probably the one you're most comfortable with. And so you can look for that, or you can look for and see the difference between the direct and indirect method in the text, and then pull up your cash flow statement. Here's the cash flow statement for my company. And, use what you know from chapter 14 and answer the question. In this case, my AILM did get it correct. For the current ratio problem, you're going to do the same thing. Find the balance sheet. Once you get the balance sheet, calculate the current ratio, and then check the math. This is a spot where I see math mistakes from AILMs all the time. They're pretty good at evaluating words and summarizing and restatements of words, but they're not as good with numbers. And so do make sure that you recalculate the amount. Note, as you're doing this, the current ratio is a number you have to calculate on your exam. And so this is not just for funsies. This is also a good practice for you on the exam. Find the current ratio. You can see we had, in this case, ChatGPT did a good job. It actually found the current assets and the current liabilities, found current assets, found current liabilities, did the math, was correct. But please verify. I've seen AI use the wrong information, use the wrong dates, do the wrong math. So there's lots of spots where it can get kind of turned around and sideways on something like this. And that's it. We've appreciated your participation in going through and working on this. Hopefully you haven't found this to be too much of a painful process. And please make sure to share some feedback with your instructor in your discussion board about your company and your discussion board about the class. If you enjoyed this or didn't enjoy this, or there's something in particular you liked or didn't like, please make sure that you share that feedback to your instructor. But as always, you need to know what you need to do to get your points. And so here's what you need to do. The same things you've had to do for every one of these problems. You need to make sure you disclose which AILM you used. Put a summary of the answer to both questions in your response. How you evaluated the response. Again, if you said it was correct, that's fine. You don't need to necessarily walk through the whole process you went through. If you think that the answer was correct, then just say, I looked on page whatever, and I found the answer and it was correct. Make sure you give a link to the 10K in your assignment. And again, as I mentioned, make sure you put the page number in there as well. So again, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as possible. And again, please reach out to your instructor if you have any feedback or if you have any questions or if you need assistance with any calculations. Your instructor would be happy to assist you.